Safeco, contrary to their name, has produced some of the most unsafe and accident-prone rides of all time, with their Crazy Frog or Jump being one of their most problematic. Today's video will try to cover every recorded accident or incident involving one of these rides. But just like my video on elastic slingshot rides, the frequency of accidents on these rides combined with their traveling nature means that I will undoubtedly miss many accidents. First, we'll break down just what hazards exist on these rides and what makes them so unsafe. Then we'll attempt to cover every recorded accident. The Safeco Crazy Frog is a jump-style ride. There are many such rides made by many different manufacturers. However, only the Safeco version is known to be especially unsafe. The ride consists of a central column that is able to spin. Attached to this is 12 to 14 sweep arms. These sweep arms are attached near the top of the central column, with a pneumatic ram attached underneath them to a lower point on the central column. At the end of the sweep arms sit a rider vehicle capable of holding between 1 and 3 riders. Some versions feature a lap bar while others feature an over-the-shoulder restraint. The ride is controlled by an electronic PLC which is able to run some basic ride functions, such as spinning the central column clockwise and counterclockwise, and doing 16 different pre-programmed ride cycles. This PLC also features an emergency stop that can stop all ride motion. In addition to this, the ride features a foot pedal that the operator can press to instantly open the air bleed valves on the pneumatic rams and cause all the sweeps to drop rapidly. This foot pedal has no safety mechanisms in place to prevent it from being pressed so long that the sweeps reach the bottom of their range of motion. There is a small air spring built into the rams, but this can also be manually adjusted by the owner, and in the event where the ram loses air pressure, this will not function. The foot pedal's usage can allow for sudden changes in acceleration, especially in cases where a sweep crashes to the lowest position. This can result in up to 9 Gs being exerted by the ride, which is well over the TUV and ASTM limit of 6. Simple operator errors, such as using the foot pedal for too long or too frequently, can cause this to happen. This ride encourages use of the foot pedal, as it's able to be used during any ride cycle, and must be used with the ride cycle known as freefall mode. In this cycle, all sweeps are raised to the highest position and then dropped by use of the foot pedal. Whenever the foot pedal is used, ride forces have been shown to increase dramatically. The ride sweeps feature an all-steel design with a backing bar located near the point where the ram attaches. This backing bar is only attached to the left and right sides of the sweep, and not the bottom or top. The area of the sweep directly above the backing bar where the sweep bends sees the most stress anywhere on the ride. At this location, there is a weld that sees significant stress and is prone to developing cracks on the internal side of the weld, well before they appear on the external side. The weld point for the backing bar is also a high stress point located near this main stress point. This results in a single point of failure on the arm that is weakened with each high G bounce caused by improper usage of the foot pedal. It has been found that under normal operation, the lifetime of these welds is only about 5 to 6 years. With this dropping to less than 1 year with frequent misuse of the foot pedal. This weakness is made worse by the design of the ride, which features cabling that runs directly over this high stress area for the ride's lights. This makes inspecting the ride very difficult visually. The rider vehicles attached to the sweeps come in 2 different varieties. These include lap bars and over-the-shoulder harnesses. The shoulder harness version is not known to have many major issues, at least on the non-suspended versions of this ride. However, the lap bar version features many issues that make it not ASTM or TUV compliant. The ride's lap bar is secured in a single position and can restrain up to 3 riders at once. This means that depending on the size of the rider, there may be a large difference between them and the restraints. The restraints are also located far in front of the back of the seat, meaning that smaller riders may not be restrained by this device at all. This lap bar is primarily useful as a restraint for resisting mainly forward and horizontal movement, which does not occur very much on this ride. The lap bar is also secured with a simple locking pin on the outside of the rider vehicle, much like what can be found on many Music Express rides. This can easily come undone or be undone by the riders themselves. Some of these rides are fitted with an additional seatbelt that goes across all riders' laps. This may somewhat help. However, as this can be easily unfastened by riders and it is shared between all riders, it's not a reliable means of restraining smaller riders. Finally, the ride's vehicles can seat up to 3 riders and are attached to the sweep arm using a 2-pin system located under each vehicle for easy attachment and detachment for when the ride's transported. The mounting points for these pins are welded directly to the underside of the ride seats, and these welds see the full force of holding the seats in place. This has resulted in cases with one or more of these welds failing. With many of this ride's design problems centering around the possibility of the sweeps crashing to the ground, it's useful to discuss how the ride was designed to prevent this from happening. Most rides are designed to be fail-safe, meaning that in the event of some kind of failure, they're designed to fail into a safe state. This is not the case for the Crazy Frog. All of the following events can cause the sweep arms to come crashing to the ground, subjecting riders to 9 Gs. Failure or lack of data from the position center on the bounce ram, valve failure on the ram, pneumatic hose failure, pneumatic actuator seal failure, specific issues with the ride's PLC, other mechanical failures, as well as operator error when using the foot pedal. Simply put, this ride was not designed to be fail-safe, and thus if anything goes wrong, it presents a great risk to riders. The ride is also prone to other problems, such as subjecting riders to very strong G-forces when the air pressure is too high, which has caused riders to be injured without even being ejected from the ride unit itself. All of these problems combined have led to a large number of accidents and injuries. The majority of these have been from one of the following: the sweep arm breaking in some way, riders being ejected from the inadequate restraints, and riders being injured by the ride's forces. With a technical overview of these rides complete, we can now look at the many different accidents that have occurred. Keep in mind, this is not a comprehensive list. There are likely many more than what I have compiled here. In June of 2000, a Crazy Frog operating at a fair in Essex in the UK ejected a rider due to the failure of the restraints to contain them in the ride unit under the ride's forces. It's not clear if this was caused purely by the lap bar's inadequate nature or by the failure of an operator to ensure the lap bar was secured. In any case, the rider was ejected after the ride started and suffered serious injuries. Sometime in late 2003, a Safeco jump ride operating at a fair in Glasgow, Scotland was operating normally. A rider was loaded onto the ride and the ride was started. At some point during the ride, the foot pedal was used, resulting in high positive G-forces. This caused the rider to suffer serious injuries to their spine as they were thrown up and down by the ride. The ride was closed and a full investigation into the ride's forces took place, with the investigation finding that the ride did have very rapid transitions from strong positive to strong negative vertical G-forces when the foot pedal was used, specifically when the ride was used in freefall mode. In August of 2008, a close call occurred on a Crazy Frog operating somewhere in the UK. During the ride cycle, it was noticed that half of one seat's lap bar was moving more than it should. The ride stopped and it was noticed that the weld holding the top of the lap bar to the lower section on one side had failed completely. Thankfully, no one was injured. Sometime in 2009, a Crazy Frog operating in Cambridge in the UK seriously injured a rider's back. Like the 2003 incident, it was investigated and in this case the ride was not being operated with freefall mode or the foot pedal. G-force testing found the ride to be within limits, and so this injury was believed to be caused by an unknown pre-existing condition. On July 29, 2009, a Crazy Frog in operation at Central Pier in Blackpool was operating normally. The ride was loaded nearly full with riders and the operator started the ride cycle. The ride began to rotate and soon lifted into the air. As all of the ride's arms lifted into the air, the operator heard a loud bang and witnessed one of the arms break in half and fall to the ground. The operator immediately pressed the emergency stop and brought the ride to a halt. Riders in this car were injured but were able to make a full recovery. The investigation into this incident was well documented and could honestly get its own video. In short, the ride's non-destructive testing schedule for sweep arm cracks provided by Safeco was based on the ride experiencing between negative 0.5 and positive 3 Gs. This was far less than the force the ride would actually regularly see. This had resulted in large cracks forming over time in at least 2 of the ride's sweeps. Some of these cracks were noticed and had been weld repaired in the same manner as on other amusement rides, as in general, small cracks forming is common and expected on all rides. However, due to the design of the sweeps, crack formation was found to be much more common, and cracks are more likely to form on the inside of the arm where they cannot be easily noticed compared to the outside. Additionally, the location of the repair welds used on the rides had resulted in a weak point where further cracks quickly developed. The report recommended owners inspect these sweeps with non-destructive testing at least twice per year instead of once, and that owners are not to make weld repairs to arms, instead to buy new ones once cracks are noticed, with them also finding the fatigue life of the arms to be around 5 years, which is extremely short for a ride. The accident ride was 6 years old at the time. On July 28, 2012, a Crazy Frog at Billy Bates Fairground in Abbey Park, Leicester was operating normally. 2 riders were loaded into one of the rider vehicles and the ride was started. As the ride was starting to pick up speed while still on the ground, one of the welds under the seat holding it to the sweep failed, causing the seat to flip up at a 90-degree angle and throw the riders out of their seats. This resulted in the 2 riders being injured but making full recoveries. The ride was closed and it was found that the 2 welds holding the mounting hardware for the seat were of low quality and could be prone to failure. The use of a pair of round pins for mounting the seats in place also made it possible for the seats to flip like this in the event that one weld were to fail. In July 2014, a Safeco suspended jump in Australia ejected a young rider, causing their death. The ride is very similar to a regular jump, but features seats that can rotate and only comes with hydraulic over-the-shoulder restraints. The investigation would find that not only was the ride's height requirement too low, but the restraint mechanism was being maintained improperly. The Safeco provided instructions for the ride, instructed owners to continuously add hydraulic fluid to the ride's restraint systems even when it was not needed. This contradicted the instructions given by the manufacturer of the hydraulic system itself. When the ride's owners did this, it did not allow for the valves within the restraint system to close properly, and would cause the restraints to slowly raise throughout the ride cycle. These findings would result in the ride type being banned in Australia altogether. This specific Safeco ride would then be sold to the UK and would have another accident in 2019. On October 10, 2019, the same Safeco suspended jump from the previous accident was operating at the Hull Fair in the UK. The ride was completing its normal ride cycle. A rider was then thrown under their restraints. They flew about 32 feet or 10 meters before landing on a rider on an operating Sizzler ride nearby. The rider suffered serious injuries, as did the rider on the Sizzler. The investigation results were not released to the public. However, a similar issue with the ride's restraints was suspected. The ride would be subsequently banned from the UK and would be sold back to Safeco, who shortly after went bankrupt altogether. Sometime around 2020, a Crazy Frog on the Isle of Wight in the UK experienced a major failure when one of the 2 mounting brackets used to connect the ride vehicle to the sweep arm broke at the weld, causing the car to end up at a 90-degree angle while the ride was in motion. This happened on a version of the ride with over-the-shoulder restraints. These were able to effectively restrain riders during this event and there were no injuries. Regardless, an investigation was launched that recommended frequent checks of the welds located under the rider vehicle, with this also noting that it's possible for cracks to form in these welds inside of the frame. Accordingly, they may be missed with just visual inspections. On April 3, 2023, a Safeco Crazy Frog located at a fair in Epsom in the UK was operating normally. A car was loaded with 3 younger riders who were all over the height requirement for the ride. The ride started and began its normal cycle. It's not clear if the foot pedal was used. At some point during the middle of the ride, the 3 riders became free of their restraints, possibly due to the secondary seatbelt added to the ride becoming undone. The 3 riders were bounced around inside the ride unit for at least a few more bounces before this was noticed and the ride was brought to a controlled stop. 2 of the riders were thrown around enough to need to visit the hospital. They would all eventually make a recovery. Had the ride not been stopped, this likely could have ended much worse. On June 10, 2024, a Safeco Crazy Frog located at Lambeth Country Show in South London was operating normally. Around 6:20 p.m., 3 riders were loaded into one of the rider cars. On one of the larger bounces, potentially one using the foot pedal, all 3 riders were ejected from their car, likely after their lap bar opened. The riders landed both around the ride and on a bystander. All 4 involved received serious injuries, with one of the riders' injuries described as life-changing. On August 3, 2024, a crazy frog located at a fair in Vigo, Spain was operating normally. A car was loaded with 3 riders and the ride was started. The ride completed its normal forward cycle and began going backwards. During the backwards part of the ride cycle, the sweep arm the 3 riders were seated in completely detached from the center spindle. After this occurred, the ride was still doing its normal ride cycle, and it shot compressed air into the air ram under the rider's sweep. With the sweep no longer being attached, this caused the sweep to shoot up into the air and completely detach from the ride. The end of the sweep with the rider vehicle attached was flung into the fencing around the ride itself. One of the 3 riders was killed after being smashed between the ride vehicle and the fence. The other 2 riders survived but suffered serious injuries. The cause of the breakage is still under investigation, but like many things on these Safeco rides, the mounting point for the sweeps is not quite as bulky as on other rides of the same design. It's foreseeable that cracks may be able to develop here, and if left unchecked, an accident like this is completely possible. On September 14, 2024, a Safeco Crazy Frog, located at Bornos Fair in Spain, was operating normally. Around 8:30 p.m., 3 young riders, all under the age of 10, were loaded into one rider vehicle together. The ride soon began its normal cycle. After a particularly hard bounce, likely due to the use of the foot pedal, the car the 3 riders were seated in could be seen to completely detach from the sweep. It was then flung up into the air, landing near the ride. The ride was quickly stopped. All 3 riders were injured, with 2 of them being seriously injured. As of this video's creation in April of 2025, that's all the recorded accidents I was able to find from these rides. Again, there are likely many more that have fallen out of public knowledge. As a promoter for this industry, these rides make me very annoyed. While most manufacturers go out of their way to take every possible safety precaution when designing their rides, Safeco clearly went with the simplest and cheapest option when making these rides. This has resulted in their rides flinging a rider or a part of the ride off at least every year or so. It's disappointing to have to talk about these rides, as to the average person, a Safeco jump is no different than any other ride. Safeco went out of business in 2020, likely contributing to an increase in the number of these accidents. That being said, there have been efforts made to make these rides safer. With the increasing number of accidents on these rides, the UK Health and Safety Executive completed and publicly released a study on these rides and their risks in 2013. This report aimed to uncover the underlying risks present on these rides. They also aimed to develop plans to be followed by owners. They advise removing the foot pedal functionality altogether due to the amount of problems that it causes. They also recommend inspecting the inside of each sweep twice annually at least to look for developing cracks. They also do not advise making weld repairs of any cracks due to the cracks most likely starting inside of the sweeps and therefore not being easily repaired. Instead, sweeps should be completely replaced when cracks are detected. They have made similar recommendations about inspecting for cracks on the ride seat mounts. This is all fine. However, none of their recommendations are the law, even in the UK. And frankly, compared to other rides, their recommendations are ridiculous. The amount of non-destructive testing that must be done just to keep these rides safe from cracks is significantly higher than any other ride that I'm aware of, including similar rides from other manufacturers. Being unable to weld repair a small crack and instead having to buy a whole new sweep arm is unheard of with other rides. Having to remove an entire section of the ride's control system, the foot pedal, just to make the ride operate somewhat safely? I could go on and on. I'm of the opinion that all of these Safeco Crazy Frog rides should just be retired. There are simply better and safer rides that will probably end up costing owners less in the long run, that is, as long as they care about keeping riders safe. If you're questioning if a ride is a Safeco, I would recommend researching the showman that owns it. Many owners list their rides' manufacturers on their websites. Failing this, you can always reach out to them directly. That concludes this deep dive into the Safeco Crazy Frog. These rides can still be found operating mostly at fairs. Unless you are familiar with the showman and trust that they are performing everything needed to keep this ride operating safely, you may want to just avoid riding one of these rides, especially one with only a lap bar. As always, the reports I used to create this video are linked in the description, and I encourage you to read them for yourself, as there is a lot of information I was not able to include. As always, if you enjoy the way I cover these accidents, please consider subscribing so that these videos appear above others in the YouTube algorithm. This will be the final normal upload until the end of the summer, with Flat Ride Friday pre-recorded uploads starting next week. Thanks for supporting the channel, and I'll see you in the fall.